Well, if you can't tell from the title, and you can't tell from the games, and you can't tell from the shirt, we're going to be talking about Devil May Cry. Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome to another installment of Deep Dive into Gaming. So far, this series has been going really good, and I'm glad I got to talk a lot about some of the games that I've been wanting to talk about, but the one game series that I wanted to talk about very deeply was actually the Devil May Cry series, because recently, by recently about a month ago probably, at this point, I purchased the Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition because they had it on sale on the PlayStation Store for, I think it was like 50% off at least, if not a little bit more. I don't remember how much, but it was like half of what the original price was, which was like $24.99. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, you know what, I'll just wait it out a little bit, you know, if I have extra cash or something like that. And then all of a sudden it became available for like $12.99. I was like, I'm getting it. I'm getting it. So, yeah, the special edition, you know, I figured, you know what, I'll try to beat it real quickly and everything like that, and then that way I can talk about that as well as the actual series itself. So, Devil May Cry, I actually got started in Devil May Cry with Devil May Cry 3, actually. 3 was the first one that I got to play. And I wanted to play it because my best friend TJ, this was actually the start of what I would like to call friend introducing me into gaming concept, because at the time I played mostly games that I felt comfortable into, like, in my own mindset, because I was like, you know, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, you know, it was a slow progress of me, like, getting into actual games and everything like that. And it was thanks to my best friend TJ that I got into Devil May Cry. And then, of course, Resident Evil 4, which I still need to try to play through some of the previous titles, because I've heard they were really good, instead of going through the shit pile. But despite that fact, though, I was really glad that he got me Devil May Cry 3. He got me the original one, because I think he had the special edition of Devil May Cry 3, where it featured, like, the ability to fight against Jester, and then, of course, playing as Virgil. I played the original one, which, for some reason, whenever it came out first, it had one flaw, which was that the normal mode was a little bit too hard, which I was like, how is that possible? Then again, now I play Dark Souls, so maybe back then difficulty wasn't that bad, but was a bit of an issue. But beside that point, Devil May Cry 3, when it came out, the difficulty was harder for normal mode, and when they released it as the special edition, Dante's Awakening, they changed the difficulty to where normal mode wasn't as hard, and then of course they had the extra features and stuff. And eventually I did get to play the special edition of Devil May Cry 3 whenever the HD collection came out. And I actually played through 1 and 2 before that came out. But I'll talk about how I got into that transition later on. But when I played through Devil May Cry 3, I really enjoyed the combat system. I really liked the story, and then of course I really liked all of the bosses that you got to fight in the entire game and everything. It just... Devil May Cry 3 will always be my favorite game of the series of Devil May Cry. I'm not saying any of the other ones are bad, but Devil May Cry 3 was probably the best one out of the bunch, I think. And I think everybody who's a fan of Devil May Cry will agree with me on that one. Devil May Cry 3 is the bomb. So, eventually I did get into playing Devil May Cry 1 and 2 later on. I don't know if some of you remembered, but a few years back, before PlayStation 3 started releasing HD collections, they had a collector set that was going on for like 3 for 3. They had the Metal Gear Solid trilogy in a pack one time. And then I saw the Devil May Cry trilogy, and I was like, you know what? I haven't got the special edition of Devil May Cry 3, and I figured since it came with the trilogy set, I figured why not go ahead and get it. So I played through 1 and 2, and then I played through Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition Dante's Awakening. And I have to say that playing through the trilogy itself, it gave me an idea of what Capcom was going through when the Devil May Cry series was being made. Devil May Cry 1, for those of you that don't know, was basically the creation towards Resident Evil 4. Which is ironic, actually. My favorite game series, Devil May Cry, was spawned from another favorite game, Resident Evil 4. But, Devil May Cry 1 had the same atmosphere and style as a Resident Evil game, but a little bit more faster paced in terms of combat, as well as swords. So it was definitely interesting to see where Capcom got its start from, and how it grew into Devil May Cry 3. And I saw the transition from Devil May Cry 1 because there was a lot of stuff that was different. For starters, Dante wasn't as slick and cool as he was in the third one. And I think what it was is that at the time they didn't know what they wanted out of Dante. They didn't know how they wanted to make him. And the voice actor even was that way, you know. We're talking like PS2, like early PS2, where voice acting wasn't as critical, and we had cheesy voice liners. Yeah! Seriously, some of the lines in Devil May Cry 1 is probably some of the more cringier moments, especially towards the end where Dante's holding Trish and everything like that. Spoiler alert, by the way. But he was holding her and everything like that, and he said, "I just wanted to fill your heart with light!" And I'm like, how? It's just everything else wasn't as bad until I got to that scene, and I'm like, oh wow, that voice actor had no idea what he was doing. Then again, this was like, I want to say, what year did Devil May Cry 1 come out? Oh, it won't tell me, will it? Says 2012, but I'm pretty sure Devil May Cry 1 came out earlier than that. I'm pretty sure. Barry, put up the year that Devil May Cry 1 came out. We're gonna do that. But back then, I'm sure they didn't really know what they wanted to do with the Devil May Cry series. And I say because of what Devil May Cry 1 did, they decided to work on a sequel known as Devil May Cry 2. A lot of people didn't like this title from what I've heard. A lot of people didn't really like this one because of how different it felt. Personally, it didn't feel that majorly different, and I actually kind of liked it, the second one, because it actually featured something else that I liked out of video game series, which is range. I know that's kind of weird to say coming from Devil May Cry, but hear me out. In Devil May Cry 2, there was like a maximum of like 2 different sword weapons in the game, and needless to say, out of those 2 different swords, other than his normal sword that he had a shorter but wider sword, Buster Sword, and then he had a longer and skinnier sword. I think it was called the Black Cayete or Black Blade or something. I can't remember what that was called. But that was actually the one weapon that I would use all the time because of its length, the range of that weapon. It's just, I preferred range weapons entirely because that means I don't have to be as close to the enemy to where it could hurt me or grab me or whatever, and instead I have a distance-sized weapon to where I'm actually able to hit them. Plus, I think the farther away you are, the more damage you're likely to do with them. That was something that I always thought, because the farther the edge of that blade towards that point, the more damage you're going to deliver to the opponent because of that point. That's how I thought it, anyway. This was my mind concept and everything like that. And personally, I kind of liked it, the second one, anyway. Just, the bosses were pretty interesting. The area themselves was pretty interesting as well. The transformation of, like, the building, for example, where a demon just kind of popped out of that tower, that was pretty freaking crazy as well. And it's just, the entire area, honestly, the voice acting wasn't really as noticeable in this one because there wasn't that much in terms of story transition in this one. And I think that might be another reason why most people didn't like it, because it wasn't as invested as, like, the first one was. But honestly, I actually kind of enjoyed the overall concept of Devil May Cry 2. It felt like a normal, like, I suppose you could say, episode of Devil May Cry, which If you haven't seen the anime series of Devil May Cry, you should. It's actually a really good series. I recommend it. But anyway, it felt like a normal episode of like Devil May Cry, as it probably would be, and it's just pretty interesting. Like, it didn't have to be main portion towards Devil May Cry. It just had to be something that involved Dante. You know, it was pretty interesting in my personal opinion. And then, of course, the transition ideal of being able to play as another character on Disc 2, because when it was on the PS2, it had 2 discs. Disc 1, you were playing as Dante, and Disc 2, you were playing as Lucia. And honestly, that was pretty cool. I actually enjoyed it fighting as her because of the unique combat style. So, after a while, I started to actually like the series of Devil May Cry, and I actually ended up enjoying not just Devil May Cry 3, but also the entire series. And then Devil May Cry 4 came out shortly after I played through Devil May Cry 1 and 2 and 3 again. And at the time that Devil May Cry 4 came out, I got very invested with Devil May Cry 4 in its earlier stages, because I actually knew someone who was trying to go into the realm of beta testing. This was back whenever I was going in high school, and at the time I too was trying to go into beta testing as well, because I liked the idea of testing out games before they came out. The only problem was I didn't know a legit way of doing it. I didn't know if there was a way to, like, hey, maybe you had to have huge connections to the company. Maybe there was like a secret way to talk to them or something like that. Or maybe you can look up an application and apply then. Which there wasn't any at all. Life was tough back in high school. It really was. So, needless to say, at the time, Devil May Cry 4 came out and everything like that. And I already knew about all of the stuff thanks to the guy who was beta testing the game at that time. So I started to play through Devil May Cry 4 and everything like that. And at first, I kind of had like mixed feelings toward Devil May Cry 4, because you were playing as Nero. You didn't play as Dante, you were playing as Nero. And I felt like Dante should have more exposure, and because of how Devil May Cry 4 did execution towards Dante, I felt like they could have done it a little bit better. I mean, I understand re-fighting the same demons that you have fought previously, but honestly, it was kind of lackluster. And then it wasn't until like years later that I found out why people liked the Devil May Cry Sword. Devil May Cry Sword. That would be an interesting title. Devil May Cry Sword. Capcom, work on that title! Last thing we need is another DMC, Devil May Cry. Anyway, so, needless to say, after finding out more about Devil May Cry 4, I kind of gave it a little bit more tribute towards 4, because it had a unique gameplay style, and it was actually one of the first that actually made Devil May Cry 4 more skilled in terms of gameplay style. I actually was kind of surprised as to like how 4 did when it comes to Nero, because he was like the only character who had unique abilities because of his hand. So, in a sense, while Devil May Cry 4 isn't like my all-time favorite, it is still a favorite in the series, and I still look at 4 as well as the previous 3 into the whole series itself. And I really enjoyed Devil May Cry. I enjoyed Dante. I really hope that Capcom does consider the ideal of Devil May Cry 5 like a legit sequel, a real sequel, not that reboot bullshit, the actual sequel to Devil May Cry 5. I would love to see one. So, I really don't want to talk about that. I really don't. I know you want me to. I know you want me to. You want me to so badly. You want to see me rage about that piece of shit. But I'm not going to today. No, I'm going to save that for another video in time, because I feel like that needs to be talked about entirely. Like, the entire concept of DMC Devil May Cry as to the garbage that it is, compared to the greatness of what it should have been. Then again, it was worked with both Capcom and Team Ninja, which is weird, because Team Ninja never screws up. I wonder if it's because Capcom screwed it up, or Team Ninja. Then again, this was during a time that Capcom was kind of fucking up series, so yeah. Nothing against Capcom, I'm just saying, you screwed up my favorite series, get back on your feet. But, yeah, like I said, if I had to say, in terms of order of, like, what was my favorite, obviously Devil May Cry 3 is my all-time favorite. Devil May Cry 2, and then it's kind of a tie between Devil May Cry 1 and Devil May Cry 4. Again, because of the fact that I didn't play as Dante as much in the main game, I kind of has, like, hesitance about it. But Devil May Cry 1 is pretty good, but it is kind of dated in terms of today's standards. But that isn't until I played Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition. And honestly, I have to give it credit where credit is due. When Capcom makes characters for the actual game itself, like different characters to play through the entire story campaign, while they don't get invested in the story of that character as much now, they do really good when it comes to the gameplay quality. In Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, not only do you play as Dante and Nero again, but you get to play as Trish and Lady in a campaign. You play as Lady first, and then you get to play as Trish. And both of their combat is freaking off the wall. It's freaking crazy, but I absolutely love it because it works for them. It makes them unique. And it makes it to where the gameplay style doesn't go stale, it makes it unique. And then, of course, there's Virgil, which, if you're aware of Virgil gameplay style in Devil May Cry 3, is pretty much the same in Devil May Cry 4, except I feel like they changed something with the blades. I suppose people call it sword dance? That's an interesting concept. Brandon kind of mentioned that up to me whenever I talked about it. He mentioned of how Virgil actually has the ability known as sword dance, and it makes him stronger. And I'm like, wow. That makes sense. But it's pretty interesting. But yeah, I was really interested in the gameplay mode that they had there. And also, too, before Special Edition came out, I eventually found out about Legendary Dark Knight mode. And when I saw gameplay footage of Legendary Dark Knight mode, I eventually was like, I need this in my life. And then I played through Legendary Dark Knight mode in the new Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, and I fell in love with this game. So if I had to say, like, legitimately, I think Devil May Cry 4 slowly comes up to the number 2, only because of Legendary Dark Knight mode. I want to see Legendary Dark Knight mode reappear in Devil May Cry 5 whenever they do work on it, or whenever it does get revealed, or whenever they do anything with the series. I want to see Devil May Cry with Legendary Dark Knight mode, because that is freaking awesome. I absolutely love that mode. That is freaking awesome. Let me know in the comments below, though, if you want to see me play through Legendary Dark Knight mode, because I can't help but gush over how cool that is. Yuck. Did I do a JonTron right there? Yuck. Oh well. Anyway, but I just wanted to talk about Devil May Cry and everything because I really enjoy the series. It's one of my favorite out there, and if you haven't played it before, do go out there and play it because it's a really interesting series, and it's by far one of the best hack and slash that came out there. So, without any ado, that's going to be it for this video. I'll catch you in the next one. Till then, this is BlackCross signing off. Take care, guys.